From WLWT, this is Issues.
Hello everyone, I'm Courtis Fuller and welcome to Issues. Today my guest will be Council Member Wendell Young, and we are going to talk about a whole host of issues, if you will. Of course, a lot's been going on here in the city of Cincinnati, and so please welcome my guest, Council Member Wendell Young.
Thank you, Courtis.
I should point out, how long have you been on council now?
Since 2010.
Since 2010, a former police officer.
Yes.
Almost 30 years on the force?
25.
25.
Yeah,
That's close
That's
enough.
close to 30, yeah.
and then also worked for the city, former president of the NAACP. I always like to give your background because you've been out there a long time. You just didn't jump on the scene in 2010.
True.
We've been hearing from you lately on an issue that involves your role as council member, but your knowledge as a police officer, and it involves a pay issue for police officers. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, how we got to this point, and your concern about where things are going forward.
Well, I'm not really sure how we got to the point where police officers feel they should be paid if they wear a body cam. I left the department just as technology was really beginning to roll in. I retired in '92. But I can recall when police officers were first being issued personal radios. And prior to that, you had radio in the car, or you went to a call box or a public phone to be in contact with the communications center. So a lot of guys didn't want the personal radio because it meant, of course, you could be contacted no matter where you were. And there were people who resisted that, but we got the radios and everybody fell in love with them. Later along came the bulletproof vest or bullet-resistant vest, and a lot of cops, I'm one of them, didn't want to wear them. They were uncomfortable, they were hot, they were bulky, but people adjusted to them. I don't think you could get many cops to go without them today. Then there was the issue of the dash cam, and I can remember how cops didn't want that. And now today, I think most police officers are glad to have them. I know the public is glad that we have them. And today, we're now talking about body cams, and suddenly there's a need to get paid. But through all of those things, I never recall that there was ever an issue of we need to bargain if we're going to wear a bulletproof vest, or if we're going to wear a personal radio, or if we're going to have a dash cam or change a uniform. I've never heard that. And I think that when the public hears this, it really upsets them, and I don't think it makes the cops look good. I don't understand why they would do this, but I think that from the citizens' point of view, with all we're seeing going on around the country, I think the general consensus is the body cam is probably better for the officer than it is for anybody else, because so many times officers are involved in situations where it's his word or her word against whoever they're having the contact with. That body cam, in many cases, clears officers of frivolous complaints of wrongdoing. And so it also makes it possible for the public to get a better idea and a better understanding of what officers face on a day-to-day basis. To want to make the public pay for that, in my opinion, is just unconscionable. And I really hope the FOP will not stick with that.
Because one could understand about beepers or the pagers. Boy, I sound very old when I start talking about pagers and but even cell phones and radios, because from a union standpoint, that may involve, when you say when a person could be contacted, well, the union's position would be either you're on duty or you're off duty, and so that could roll into some issues there. So that was something that I might understand more.
I think it's easier to understand if you say to an officer, and we used to say that, you're required to carry a weapon at all times, even on your off time. You're required to be in contact at all times, even on your off time. I would bargain those kinds of things, of course you would. But in terms of just your day-to-day work, for having something that keeps you safe, I don't really know why you'd want to bargain that. I cannot imagine that if officers had had the opportunity, they would have bargained about whether they'd rather walk a beat or drive a car. There are just some things that don't make a lot of sense. And in my estimation, this is one.
Why? Why do you think it has become? Is it because it's so controversial?
I think there's an atmosphere in the city of Cincinnati right now around the whole collective bargaining issue that is pretty much toxic. And it's strange what you're seeing, because we have a situation right now where the mayor has reached around the city manager and bargained directly. I'll use the FOP right now because they were actually in negotiation, and bargained directly with the FOP as well as some of the other unions. And the end result has been that the FOP appears not to be interested in collective bargaining around the wages and so forth, because the mayor has made an offer that apparently the city manager has not been able to meet. But then you turn right around when you're being told you're going to give a body cam. Now you want to do collective bargaining. So you really can't have it both ways. But I think the mayor has authored this confusion that we're probably going to deal with for a while, because it is a total change and a departure from the charter and the way it delineates what the authorities are of the mayor, the council, and the city manager. And under the charter, it's the city manager's purview to do the bargaining. And so that's what's been happening here. And we have a ruling in North Olmsted, Ohio, where just the reverse occurred, where the unions went to the elected officials and said they wanted to bargain with them. They didn't like what the city manager was doing. And the SERB board, the State Employee Relations Board, said, you can't do that. Well, this is just a reverse situation, the mayor going around the city manager directly to the unions. My belief is that it's the same thing and every bit is illegal. But whether that is or is not, what is very clear is that he is violating the charter. He's violating the law in the city of Cincinnati that says the mayor does not have that authority.
Especially to offer a deal, if you will, that would be binding. I guess he could throw out any suggestion that he wants, but nothing that could be binding.
There's a real myth here, but the real danger, and I don't want to get hung up in whether raises are appropriate or that sort of thing, because I'm not against people getting raises. What I am against is usurping the authority of the city manager. What I am against is doing things the charter does not permit. And our charter was born out of the very chaos that we're seeing a return to. There are probably none of us old enough to remember, but we're all aware of the history in the city of Cincinnati, the Boss Cox era that we often refer to, where you had the cronyism and the bossism and all the corruption and stuff.
That was back in the 20s.
Back in the 20s,
hold
right.
your thought, let me take a break, and we'll pick it up right there, because the history is very important. Many people watching probably know the history, some of it, but it's important to see how we got to this point, and even the role of the mayor and council, but we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Courtis Fuller, and here with Council Member Wendell Young. He really needs no introduction. We see you on TV as much as I'm on TV. Huh?
I don't get paid like you do, Curtis.
Well, speaking of pay, speaking of pay, we're talking about this issue of proposed raises for police officers. The mayor has proposed a raise for the officers. What's at issue is he able to do that based on the charter? Let's talk about the role of the mayor. It's my understanding that he could have brought a proposal to council.
He could have, and in my opinion, he should have. He chose not to do that. And what he's done is really set himself up now as a bargaining agent between the unions and the city. That's not his role. So I'm really talking about his role, not the fact that he's offered a raise or for how much or whatever. The question simply is, can he do that? And since he has done that, what's the damage done here? And my belief is the damage is to the collective bargaining system. Why would you bargain with a city manager if you can go directly to an elected official? And look at what that might open up. I mean, we're looking at it right now just saying that the elected officials can get involved in this. But by extension, when you open this up, it also means now the public should have a chance to weigh in. So if that's going to happen, and I could see where citizens would organize and want to have a say in the collective bargaining process, whatever that's going to look like. And so you begin to get issues that you really don't necessarily want citizens to weigh in on. maybe a lot of citizens feel like that we pay everybody too much. Or maybe a lot of citizens feel like it's okay what we pay, but they want to reprioritize how the budget is addressed in the first place. So you're not spending enough over here. When you spend it there, there's less money for raises, less money for equipment. There are a lot of things that could begin to happen when you open this process up that way. It is just not well thought out. But the important thing to remember, as far as I am concerned, is that all of us took an oath to uphold the charter. We never took an oath that said we would violate the charter. And this, in my opinion, is a violation of the charter. Bad enough that the mayor would invite city employees to help him break the law. But now he actually wants council members to vote on what he is doing. My opinion simply is that if we support him in this, we help him in breaking the law, which is the reason I filed the complaint, because I really want a clear definition. That complaint was filed with the State Employee Relations Board. They call that SERB. But we want them to take a look at this situation and offer some guidance. And the fact that I have filed is unprecedented, because my understanding is there's never been a situation where an elected official filed against another elected official. And so there is a question there about whether we have the standing to do it, but only SERB can make the ruling. And so you go ahead and you do that. So my caution and my hope is that council will wait until we hear back from SERB, so that we know that we're on as firm a ground as possible going forward. Because the question simply is, how do you get the genie back in the bottle? Are we no longer going to have the city manager be the city's bargaining agent? Or from now going forward, will it be the elected officials, in this case the mayor, who will do the bargaining? So you have the mayor actually usurping the position of the city manager, taking the authority given to the city manager under the charter and taking it under himself. He's done that without a referendum from the people that say that's what they want. So again, by extension, if our mayor is not happy with the form of government we currently have, then I believe there should be a referendum where citizens get an opportunity to say, we agree with you, you should be a strong mayor, executive mayor, we disagree, we like the charter that we have, we like the city manager form of government, you need to stay within those parameters. But none of us elected officials have the right to just reach out and grab power, especially in such a blatant way, when the effect can be so long range and so very damaging.
We were talking because, you know, most people, while we understand this role of council and mayor, there are some nuances in the charter that probably most people, when they hear strong mayor, they perceive certain things. But the reality is that the mayor has veto power, which is a very strong tool. And I think when that person, he or she, becomes mayor, at the beginning, they can, you know, offer selections. But from that point forward, it is offering proposals to the council.
Well, yes.
The council votes.
When the mayor takes office, he or she will appoint the different people that they want to head the different committees.
Powerful.
I think that's powerful in terms of being able to make certain you put people in position who understand your agenda and will likely try to support the things you want to do. That's smart. I have no problem with that. But once that's done, council functions on its own. The mayor does not run city council. It is a partnership. The mayor can propose legislation to council. The mayor can veto legislation that council has that he does not or she does not agree with. There's a way to override the mayor's veto if that would be necessary. But under the charter form of government we have, the real power in our local government rests with the city council, not in the mayor's office. That is chafing to some people who become mayor, because there are a lot of things they'd like to be able to do, they just don't have the power to do, and they have to work through the council. I think that's healthy, and I think we're getting a really good example now of what can happen when a mayor steps outside of their prescribed role to do something that the charter does not permit them to do. And people should not be confused. The ability to introduce legislation to the council is not the same as saying this is what is going to happen. There has to be a cooperation between the council and the mayor to move the legislation forward.
And so this process, where we are, we could have somewhat been where we are in this process of having a proposal on the table for a specific raise for officers.
I think, Courtis, just to try to keep it simple, because it can get really complicated, but to try to keep it simple, we pass a budget, and in that budget, we allocate money for raises and so forth. The city manager then knows how much money he has to operate with when he sits down to bargain with people. If we as a council had decided we wanted to do what the mayor is doing, there would have been a way, had the mayor come to council and worked with the council to talk to the city manager and say to him, we think that we have more money than we anticipated, and we'd like to give employees more than we think you're currently willing to bargain for. So see what you can do with this additional amount of money.
And in all fairness, the mayor, I'm paraphrasing here, and then we'll take a break. He's saying this is being transparent, and there's nothing shady. That's not his term. That's my term. About what he's he's looking for more transparency. I think I heard him reference something about, back office negotiations. He wants to keep this very much up front. That's and again, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, and he has said that, but the reality is when you look at what's happened, you see that isn't true. Precisely the opposite has occurred. It would have been nice if everyone had known he was planning to negotiate with the unions. But had he made that announcement, he would have gotten the backlash right away. I don't think any of us think that's a good process. We would have done everything we could to stop him as a council. Even the people who are viewed to be his staunchest allies, I don't think support the process that we're currently engaged in.
Let me take a break, and I want to put a button on this when we come back. Then I have to ask you about the streetcar that's going to start rolling soon. Well, it's rolling now, but I get a chance to ride it, I guess, September 9th. Back in a moment. Welcome back. I'm Courtis Fuller, Wendell Young, council member Wendell Young. Just want to wrap up this issue. Where do we go from here now? You've filed a complaint.
The mayor's going to call for a vote, is my understanding, in September when we come back in the session. My hope is that my colleagues will table this until we get a ruling from the State Employee Relations Board, or SERB. That's my hope. If that does not occur, he'll get an up or down vote, and the council will either do what he's asked or not do what he's asked. That's what the raises are tied to. Again, I don't think there's any member of council who does not want to see employees get as much of a raise as is possible. For me, I want to be certain that they not only get a raise, I want to be certain that they get a raise that the public can afford to pay. Because at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that have to pay these bills. And so when people say to me, well, you're not standing with the unions and you're not standing with the employees, I absolutely do. I support them. How could I not? But I'm standing with the taxpayer. Because if I have to choose between the two sides, I'm going to stand with the people who put us in office. I'm going to stand with the people who have to pay these bills. I'm going to stand with the people who need to be able to benefit from good government. And I'm going to give as much of that as I can.
All right. Let's talk a little streetcar. Streetcar will be rolling officially, and people will be riding it. As I said, it's been rolling now for quite some time as a practice run. What do you anticipate once this gets going full steam ahead September 9th?
Well, I wish I could just say it's going to be a really smooth road after it happens, but, knowing all the controversy around the streetcar in Cincinnati, I know that we're going to have fits and starts, and there's some things we just have to get through. They're unfortunate, but they have to happen. There will be some accidents. We've just seen one. That's going to happen. There are going to be some other mishaps that we will have to get through. But by and large, I think that as Cincinnatians get used to sharing the highway or sharing the streets of Cincinnati with streetcars, it'll begin to work out and people will begin to understand it. I also believe that the streetcar will prove itself to be the benefit that we want it to be. There has to be a phase two. There's no getting around that.
And that phase two would go up to Clifton.
Would go up to Clifton, right. Because the streetcars originally envisioned does that. So the shortened loop that we have, in my opinion, will enjoy moderate success, but the streetcar's full potential cannot be realized until we expand the route. But in the meantime, I think it will be something that people get used to, that people will take advantage of. And my hope is that Cincinnati, like a lot of other cities that have streetcars, will find a way to embrace it and we make it work. But I think it's an exciting time for our city. And the one thing I do like about it, those big holes in the ground that we have under Central Parkway and other parts of the city, where we started a massive project and gave up on it. I'm really happy to be able to say that Cincinnati can now say we can do the big things and we can do them well. I love the can-do spirit that is alive in Cincinnati, not just around the streetcar, but around a lot of development in our city. And I want to see that expanded into our neighborhoods in a big way. So we have small things happening in neighborhoods, but I want to see transformative things happen in all of our neighborhoods. And I think the streetcar is a good example of what can happen when a significant number of Cincinnatians get together and believe in the potential and the future of our city. So I look for the streetcar to be a catalyst for those things. It's not the be all to end all, but I think it's a good signal of what is possible in a city that believes in itself.
It's interesting because other cities, I was listening to a debate up in Milwaukee, they're thinking about doing the same thing. And one of the issues that came up is, why are we spending all this money on a streetcar that goes a small way, without the full understanding that these federal dollars, you can only spend it on this.
Courtis, let's remember something.
And I don't want to go back.
Throughout our entire history,
right,
no matter what the progress has been, there have been people who didn't get it.
Right.
And so when men were trying to fly, there were people who often said, if God wanted people to fly, it would have made us with wings. But I don't think many people can argue against the advantage of having aircraft today. Same thing with the automobile. Horse and buggy was just fine. We don't need these little electric machines and gasoline machines. But what would we look like today without the automobile and the great changes and expansions it's allowed this country to make? Same was true with trains. We don't need a train. We got this, we got that. It's always going to be that when technology comes, there will be a segment, in some cases a large segment of population, that will not embrace it right away.
So he's giving me a rap. Now, the one complaint is that the streetcars are black and gold. Now, I know some people would like that.
I mean, like a Courtis Fuller who's from Pittsburgh.
Maybe they'll paint them.
But Wendell Young prefers the orange and black.
Orange and black.
Someday we're going to make that happen.
That will happen. All right, thank you. Always good to see you.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
We'll be back in a moment. Everybody talks about it. Well, that's all the time we have for you today. My thanks again to my guest, Council Member Wendell Young. That does it for now. Have a great day, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.